Hello friends, Namaskar, welcome to your channel Quest for Soma. So this is second episode in English dealing with identity of plant Soma. As you are aware, as you might be aware that plant Soma is mentioned in Rig Veda. Rig Veda is one of the most important scripture of Indian culture. So that talks about plant Soma. Similarly, Avesta of Iran that also talks about plant Homa. Both are considered to be same plant or related plants. So essentially, when we are talking about Soma, we are also talking about Homa. So the purpose of this channel is to decipher the identity of that plant. So in this second episode, we'll be talking about about a story which is written in Rig Veda regarding theft of Soma. Theft of Soma meaning that story is written in a manner that Soma was brought by way of theft from another civilization or another planet by a falcon called Suparna. Suparna, as you all of you would be aware, that falcon holds an important role in various cultures, including Indian culture. Even in Greek mythology, falcon holds important role. I understand even in Zoroastrian culture, falcon has important role. So falcon has important role in all culture. Even in Buddhist culture, falcon has a very important role. Now, one interesting aspect which comes is that the bird which is basically stealing Soma from a different civilization and then bringing that Soma to this Vedic civilization, that bird is named as Suparna in Rig Veda. So that brings us to an interesting aspect that this Suparna falcon is also finds mention in Buddhist text. So is that a coincidence that both cultures, that is Vedic culture as well as Buddhist culture, were using same name Suparna, or does it tell something else, that is one party, one culture started using the name Suparna first, and then the second culture started using that name later on. So that might be the way in which it would have evolved. That is, one culture might have started first, second culture would have followed, or there might have been parallel development. As of now, I don't want to divulge that how did Suparna came to this Vedic culture. But one important aspect is that first is that same name is there, Suparna in Buddhist culture, Suparna in Vedic culture, and we have been taught that basically Buddhism or Jainism rose in protest of Vedic culture. That is, they were against Vedic culture. People were fed up to an extent. Some people were fed up with Vedic culture because of various issues at that point of time in India. So that's why Jainism and Buddhism came in India. That is the mainstream history we are told. But we will be taking a look at that aspect as well when we go further in our quest. Suparna finds mention in both cultures, Buddhist text as well as Rig Veda. So one point raises is why this overlap of names, Suparna. Now we'll talk about that later on. But related part of this is that when Suparna stole this Soma from that civilization, it was guarded by one person named as Krishna. It's spelled slightly different than Lord Krishna in our Hindu culture, but its name is very same name, Krishna. So that person was guarding. So is this again that name Krishna, because it's a so important name in Hindu culture? It finds mention that it was Soma was being guarded by Krishna, then Suparna stole it from Krishna by some strategy. So the first question which comes to mind is that Krishna same as the Krishna which is there in Mahabharata? As you would be aware that the Mahabharata is a grand text of India, and it talks about a great war fought between two related families. So in that Lord Krishna is represented as one of the highest gods, avatar of Lord Vishnu, or some people consider Lord Krishna himself to be full god, as a complete avatar or the original deity. So Suparna stole it from Krishna. So the fact is that whether same Krishna or not, no one can be for sure. But this same name, the coincidence of same name, does create a doubt that same person might have been referred as Krishna in Mahabharata. But we'll again leave that topic for our later analysis. We will talk about one incidental aspect, that Suparna bird is, as I mentioned earlier, that Suparna word is also there in the Buddhist culture. And if we see the inscription of Ashoka the Great, the king of India who ruled large parts of India, even the map of India was bigger than the current map of India. The map of India in Ashoka time was larger than was covering much more areas than the areas which are currently being covered even in even in modern day India. So that inscriptions of Ashoka talk about two type of people. It says that Saman and Baman. Now Saman culture, that is also referred as Samanic culture in other countries, but we will focus on initial name used by Ashoka the Great, Saman culture. So Saman and Soma, again they look like very related from a linguistic perspective. Related word, Saman spelled as Saman, Soma Soma. And then the Suparna bird is doing this theft from other culture. So is there a possibility? There is a possibility, I think, of interpretation that what this story is saying is that Soma was brought from a culture that was more of a Samanic culture, as Ashoka the Great has mentioned about two cultures. So same culture, Samanic culture, it might be mentioning about that Suparna bird stole from that. So that might be one perspective. And in fact, if we see from archaeology perspective or from any perspective, no one doubts that use of bhang or cannabis and edibles was prevalent in BC era, that is before Christ era, in India, Tibet, China, that sort of area. In fact, China has most ancient recorded usage of cannabis, but India also has similarly very old usage of cannabis. So these cultures, it seems, were using cannabis much earlier than the culture of, let's say, Iran, Egypt, or Middle East or Greek. To them, it was slightly alien. Cannabis was slightly alien in BC era, as opposed to these Samanic cultures of, let's say, India, China, that was prevalent. And that this fact, this is not my finding. This is corroborated in all research that in India people were using cannabis since very long, even in BC era. In China, cannabis was used in BC era as well. So the fact that now returning back to the story, Suparna, who is from a Buddhist culture developed from Samanic culture which is mentioned in Ashoka inscription. That bird, which is now associated with Buddhist culture, which is in a way Samanic culture, that bird is stealing Soma from Buddhist civilization. Let's say that's one hypothesis, or Samanic civilization, we should call that as a Samanic or proto-Buddhist, let's say. We can call that, not Buddhist. We don't know, Buddhism might not have been there at that point of time. At the time of Vedas, that is the 1500 BC. I am right now focusing on mainstream timeline of writing of composition of Rig Veda. Mainstream timeline is 1500 BC, that is 3500 years from now. 3500 years, if we go back 3500 years, that's when Rig Veda was composed. That's the mainstream history view. I'm not necessarily saying that I subscribe to that view, but if we take mainstream view, then 3500 years back, We know for sure that Samanic culture was there in India. Samanic culture meaning people praying to nature worship, and basically nature worship of all, worship of the sky, earth, plants, water, rivers. So that sort of culture was there in India. That no one doubts. No one doubts that Ashoka has written one culture as Samanic culture, referred to them as Samans, and Buddhist culture arose from that Samanic culture. So now there's a Suparna word which is stealing from Samanic culture in a way and bringing it to Vedic culture. So from that perspective, again, it seems like it could be very well be cannabis, which was stolen from that culture and brought to this culture. Why we are saying that? Because as you would have seen, the purpose of this channel is not to basically rely just on scriptures, but to rely on evidence-based analysis. So from the perspective of evidence-based analysis, what is clear is that cannabis was in use in India in BC era. It was in use in China and other Samanic cultures in BC era. It was not that much prevalent in BC era. If we go westwards towards Iran, Egypt, Middle East, if we go there, it was not prevalent. But if we go eastward, it was prevalent. So from that perspective, it seems that it might have well been bhang which was stolen. And as I have mentioned in the first episode, the why the theory of Soma being lost was propounded was because of the fact that was propounded at a time of translation of these texts, Rig Veda and other scriptures, in English by Westerners in 19th century. So this whole concept of Soma being lost is actually product of last 200 years. Does not find any mention. The theory of Soma being lost does not find any mention in any of the Vedas. Even the fourth Veda, Atharva Veda, it doesn't find mention there. It does not find mention in any of Purans or Upanishads. It doesn't find mention there. And neither does it find mention in these books dealing with Ayurveda, Charak Samhita, Sushruta Samhita. It doesn't find mention that Soma was lost. What finds mention is that you can use an alternate plant for Soma if you don't want to use Soma. That is very clear that everyone, as I had mentioned earlier, that everyone may not be comfortable with using intoxicating plants. So that's why there would have been alternatives given that if you are not comfortable with using intoxicating plant, you can use this. You can use other non-intoxicating plant like ephedra or other things. So yes, friends, so today we talked about, I'll just summarize because I think that might be enough for today. I'll just summarize that the Rig Veda talks about a theft of Soma by a falcon named Suparna. That theft was done from a culture, a different culture, and it was brought to Vedic culture, Vedic people. So the point I made was that Suparna also finds mention in Buddhist text, and then I talked about archaeological evidences and other evidences showing that cannabis was in use, especially edible cannabis was being used, edible or drinkable cannabis was in use in Samanic cultures of India and China, even in the BC era. So there is a good possibility that what Rig Veda is actually alluding to, cannabis, edible or drinkable forms of cannabis sativa being brought from one culture, that is a Samanic culture or proto-Buddhist culture we can say, and brought to Vedic culture. So that is one aspect which we talked about. So I'll leave it there right now, and request you people to think through this and make any comment if you want to make any comment. One important point, one important aspect which I want to, one important thing which I want to mention today is that I have also authored a book titled An Immortal's Quest for Vedic Soma. That book is now available on Amazon Kindle. You can order that book on Amazon. It's titled An Immortal's Quest for Soma. You can see we have put out a book teaser for that on our channel. We'll be putting our link here. You can go through that. So that's it for today. In next episode, we'll get further into this story and further into interlinkages what was Soma, what identity is. Thank you for today.